So today's book is The Matter with Things by Dr. Iain McGilchrist. It's not really one book, it's in fact 2 volumes, both covering the same topic. And taken together with his earlier work, The Master and His Emissary, these books represent a really, truly deep dive into how our brains work, but also how that means we see the world, and even deeper with that, how the world works. Dr. McGilchrist is a psychiatrist, he's a neuroscience researcher, he's also a philosopher. These books are full of references to scientific studies, but also literature and religion and great art and history. So they're a very, very interesting read. It's taken me about 2 years to read these 3 books. Okay, so what's the fundamental thesis here? Well, it's an examination of the left-right divide in our brains. So the left hemisphere is all about getting a grip of things, controlling things and using them, whereas the right side of the brain is much more about the context and the wider picture and the things that we don't know and kind of scanning the horizon for the unknown. And the thesis of these books is that if the left brain takes over, it's a very useful servant, but it's a terrible master. And if the left brain takes over, things start to go wrong. There's a German word that Dr. McGilchrist uses, which was new to me, called Gestalt, which basically means a whole that can't be understood as just the sum of its parts. I suppose a good example of a Gestalt would be an ecosystem like the Amazon rainforest. Well, you can't understand how the Amazon rainforest works just by studying every single individual species in detail. That doesn't give you the ecosystem, it just gives you lots of chopped up little parts. And McGilchrist's point is that the right side of our brains is very good at doing Gestalt, at looking at the whole, whereas the left brain is very good at chopping things up into little categories. But the true way of seeing things is the Gestalt, is the whole picture. And what the left hemisphere tends to do is break things down into tiny pieces and then create these models, these theories as to how things work. Whereas the reality is, it's always much more complicated than that when you're looking at anything complex. So as I said, it took me about 2 years to read these books. And as I was reading them, I kept making notes and thinking, yep, that's useful, oh, that's really interesting, that's fascinating. So I picked out 3 things that I think are most useful for you in terms of how you can apply these ideas when you come to your work. So the first thing is, this left-right divide of the brain there was a little light bulb moment I had where I went, that's why stories work as beginning, middle, end, because of the left-right brain division. Let me talk you through it. The beginning is like the once upon a time. It's business as usual. And in the beginning, your left brain is in charge because you're doing the task in hand. You're getting on with doing something. Okay. And that's your once upon a time. Once upon a time we did this thing. But then, well, something happens in the story. So the dragon arrives, the chaos strikes. And so the right hemisphere takes over because it's going, whoa, hang on a second, where's this coming from? And it's suddenly, rather than trying to manage and control a task, you're suddenly trying to understand a much wider set of problems. And what the right brain does is assimilates that and turns that understanding into something useful that passes back to the left brain to get on with a new task. And that's the end of the story. So beginning, middle, end is kind of left hemisphere in charge, right hemisphere takes over, left hemisphere in charge but of a new task. Yep. Which is because the right side of the brain has assimilated all that new information that came in the chaos and turned it back into something manageable. So beginning, middle, end is task, chaos, new task, left, right, left. And that for me has been very, very interesting, and that explains all sorts of things about the way that stories work. And it's a very practical way of looking at storytelling. You're right, imagine taking that model of beginning, middle, end and think about your own experience of the pandemic. So in the beginning we had this way of working where we all turned up in offices and we worked together. But then suddenly, pandemic meant we couldn't go to work, and we were thrown into this kind of, okay, we need to understand this new world, this new situation. Okay, but gradually we brought that back again to something called hybrid working, where we get the best of both worlds. And that's the process of task, threat, new task, assimilating all the new information that was there in the chaos. Okay, so that for me, beginning, middle, end, left, right, left again, is one really interesting takeaway. Second interesting takeaway, and this is where it gets really, really deep. And in the second volume, McGilchrist goes into, well, what actually is true about the world. And the matter with things, he says, what's the matter with things? There are no things. There are only processes. So there are no things, as in fixed, forever, immutable, theoretically correct things. So even this book feels pretty solid, but it'll decay in time. So there are no things. What there are instead, and what matters, is context. What matters is process. What matters is relationship between things. Because all of those, the context, the process that something is going through, the relationship between things, they actually determine what the thing is. They determine how much it matters. And the right hemisphere is very good at dealing with context and process and relationships. The problem comes when the left hemisphere boils all that down into models, into logic and rules, into tick box exercises. And so, again, when you look at this in a professional sense, in a workplace sense, well, how is this useful? Well, again, imagine you're trying to figure out how to lead a company or how to run a team of people. Well, context, process and relationships are fundamental. Now, yes, you might be told that there's a leadership model, that there's a kind of logic to this, that there are these boxes you need to tick, but that's never going to be enough. It's never going to capture the essence of what it is to lead a team. So I think, again, the lesson for me is the model is the left brain's attempt to make sense of things. And it's useful, but only up to a point. Let me give you another example. So this is storyteller tactics you might be familiar with. These are basically cards that help you tell stories. And they're full of models. I mean, here, for example, is a story tactic called Rags to Riches, which is a story arc. Well, that's a model of how to tell stories. Now, how did I get this? Well, I spent 20 years as a journalist telling stories. Practically, I built up a lot of experience, and everything I learned there was learned in particular context, it was part of a process, and it was learned in relationship with other people. Okay, that's my right brain busily doing its thing. Then my left brain says, okay, I need to turn that into something I can teach, which is about 250 words on a piece of card with a nice story arc. Okay, I'm going to do that. So I'm condensing all that knowledge into a model. But that isn't enough for you to become a great storyteller. It'll help, you can take it away, you can study it, you can learn from it, but then you're going to apply it in a context, in a process, in relation to other people. And your growth as a storyteller is not just a question of plugging one of these cards into your head, like plugging a chip into a computer. It's a lot more than that. Right back at the beginning of Volume 1, McGilchrist comments on the fact that every single culture seems to have some version of the sorcerer's apprentice myth. And this story, if you remember it, is about an apprentice who's studying underneath the sorcerer, and the sorcerer goes out one day and tells him to clean the workshop, and the apprentice decides to use magic to do it because he's read a little bit of magic, and so he enchants the mop and the broom to start cleaning the workshop, but he can't stop them because he doesn't know enough magic, and they get carried away and they start wrecking the place, and he can't stop them until the sorcerer comes back and puts an end to it. And this is a story about a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. This is a story about getting carried away with a theory and ignoring the practice. It's the story of the left brain taking control when it should actually be the servant. I think the single simplest takeaway from all of this is don't be the sorcerer's apprentice. Be humble, realise the limits of your own knowledge, and be sceptical about anyone who tells you that anything is easy. Next week, we'll go on to the bookshelf, we'll pick out a different book, and we'll look at what I've learned from it and what you might be able to learn from it too.